Hello and welcome back to another episode of Notion Bonsai. And in this bonsai video, I'm going to be doing some winter pruning of my Japanese maple bonsai. I'm going to be going over some pruning, shaping ideas, and I'm also going to be going over when not to prune Japanese maple at this time of year. So here I have a few different Japanese maple, all at different stages of development, right from this big thick one down to a little seedling. All of these trees have lost their leaves for the winter. They've taken all the energy, or most of the energy that they can, back into the tree. And you may be thinking to yourself, Adam, I've seen people do some pruning on Japanese maple in spring, summer. When's the best time to prune them? And why would I want to prune a Japanese maple in winter? Just personally, I like to prune in winter because you can see more of the structure of the tree. You can see what's going on with the branches. There's no leaves in the way that hides everything that's going on. So I think because of this, you'll be able to make better decisions on where to prune. You can make more precise pruning rather than just cutting it to the shape of a triangle, almost like you're pruning a hedge. There's nothing wrong with this either. Just personally, if it comes to more detailed pruning where you really want to see the internodes, I would do it in winter. Also at this time of year, the sap isn't flowing. So if you make cuts, the tree's less likely to bleed. Therefore, it's not going to lose as much energy and it can make a better recovery. The only thing I would say in winter is not to do drastic, heavy pruning. For example, a big trunk like this. I like to do big cuts like this in early spring, midsummer, while the tree is actively growing. I just find the tree tends to callus over a little bit quicker during the growing season. I'm going to take some twig cutters for finer branches, some branch cutters for doing a little bit more precise cuts, and some wire cutters. That's it. You don't need these specialized bonsai tools like this. They do make the job a little bit easier to get in closer. But if you're a beginner and you're just getting started and you want to try something at bonsai, you can get by with a cheap pair of garden scissors or secateurs. You just want to make sure that whatever tool that you're using is clean and sharp. I would just like to go over one of the most important parts of bonsai, and that is knowing when not to prune a tree. Because if you have a particular goal in mind of how you want to see that tree develop, for example, with this one here, I do want this to be quite a short, small tree, maybe around this height in the future. And you may be thinking, Adam, why did you keep all this stuff above? You know, all this maple's got this big long shoot on the top. This is just a personal thing. I don't like to waste things in bonsai, or even I don't like to waste things in general as much as I can. And with this, I believe I can get another tree out of this tree. So instead of just coming in, cutting this off here, which would improve the design that I want of this tree. Even I would cut it back further to here, allow this little branch to become the next leader. I'm gonna keep this on this tree for now, and next year air layer it right here, and then this whole top section will become a new tree. And not only does keeping this and letting it grow help you in developing a second tree, but keeping a long shoot on a maple like this also helps the tree get strong. When I prune Japanese maples for ramification at this time of the year, one of my main goals is to push the growth back on the tree and encourage shorter internodes. So as you can see here on this branch here, at the end of this is nodes. Further down we've got more nodes. There's little nodes here, and each of these node sites is where leaves are going to grow from next year. The space between the nodes right in here, this is known as the internodes. So when I say I want shorter internodes, I want the distance between here and here to be as short as possible. You can see this branch comes along, splits in two, which is great, but this part here is just a little bit long for my liking, so I'm just going to cut this right here. I don't want to cut it right down really close to the node because maples tend to die back, so I'm just going to leave about half a centimeter above this. That way if this dies back, it's going to die back to this next node, and this should be okay. And with this one, compared to the last one, the internodes are a lot bigger. One here, one here, one here, and as it gets to the end, they begin to get smaller and smaller. So what I'm going to do in this case is simply cut this branch back to the lowest nodes. Again, not too close to it so there's room for dieback, and that's how we would push the growth back on a long branch. But in this case, with this long branch, if we look even closer at this section, all these branches on the underside are coming from a strange spot, so I'm going to cut these off as I don't want branches here in the future. You can see this comes out and splits into three, one in the middle, one at the bottom, and one at the top. And this is really common for Japanese maples to grow in threes like this, but the problem with it growing in threes is you do get some swelling at the point of the fork. You can even see on this one there is a little bit of swelling, and this swelling is known as inverse taper, which isn't aesthetically pleasing to the overall look of a bonsai as it develops. So when we prune Japanese maples, what we're looking to do is have it go from one to 2. And now you may be thinking, which one of these do I remove? Surely I want to remove the middle one. That way it goes from 1 to 2 and they're spread out nicely. This is probably one of the most tricky decisions when pruning Japanese maples. Which one of these 3 do I remove? There's a couple of different factors that can make your decision easier or trickier. We remove this bottom one because it's dead. Now these 2 are pretty close together. Although we always wanted to go from 1 to 2, in this case, I'm removing upward growing growth. This is also upward growing here, but I'm going to keep it for now as it's going to fill this space nicely in the summer. Not only are these branches growing on the inside of a bend, but there's 2 branches growing together, which in time will cause really bad inverse taper. So before that even happens, I'm going to cut these off. If we keep these buds, they will grow and become just like them branches, and we'll have to cut them off again, and the tree will put excess energy and resources into developing these buds. We can just knock these buds off like this. Another one right in here. You can also scrape them off with your nail if it makes it a little bit easier. Here is another little example of when not to prune. It's about 2 years old. It's got lots of nodes up the trunk in which it's going to leaf out next year. And if you came in, Adam said to go and prune between the internodes, push the growth back, do all this. If you go and blindly prune just because someone said to do it and not think about the why in bonsai, why am I doing this to this tree? In the case of a small seedling like this, most of the time you'll want to grow the tree larger and thicker into a nice thick chunky bonsai. So by pruning it like this, we'll really slow it down. It'll have to spend energy developing a new leader so it can grow tall and thicken. And if it does this again and you come in and blindly prune it, you're just going to really slow down how quickly that tree is going to thicken and develop. Of course, if you wanted to keep it small and have a little mame sized maple bonsai, by all means come in, prune it small, give it a nice little small curve, and you can make a little small bonsai from there. But really always ask yourself in bonsai, why am I doing this? And you can really understand the decisions that you're doing before you do them. The reason why I'm not going to prune this one is because I want to thicken the trunk. I want to just let it grow, let it get taller. Of course, the taller a tree is, the thicker it will get. If you wanted to thicken it even faster, I'd recommend planting it directly into the ground or even a larger pot. Whenever I first got into bonsai at the very beginning, this is one of the first maples that I got just to experiment on, do chops, see how the tree responded. Even if I turn this around, you can see there was many big branches that came off this tree I cut off just to see how it would callus over. I'm quite a big believer that one of the main ways to learn something is to just actively do it. And for me, this was just to get a tree practice on a really cheap, I think this was £15 at the time from just a garden centre. I did a few cuts, a few different types of cuts, just to get sort of a mental archive and library of how maples respond to pruning. That way when I work on more expensive trees, I can apply what I've learned on how trees callus over and heal onto them. So this is a really strange looking maple. It's got a glaring problem right away as I look at this, and that is this branch here that's growing right in towards everything. And although this branch coming in does the job of filling the space in the tree whenever it grows and fills out, in winter you can really see the glaring problem of this branch, and I really don't like how it's so angular and comes in towards everything. There's also a little bit of swelling on this portion of the trunk because there was many branches here before. So before I do this, I'm first going to just cut this here, and then we can slowly refine this cut back to where we want it. And again, just like the other trees, I'm going to leave a little bit extra here for dieback. If you wanted to, you could come in, put some cut putty on this to encourage some healing in this area. But instead, what I want to do is just let this die back naturally. And then whenever this dies back, what will happen is the tree will do what is known as compartmentalization, where it will build sort of a defensive tissue underneath. And that will stop it dying and rotting back any further. And then whenever it's compartmentalized, I'll take off all the dead parts that's left, then put on some cut putty, and that will encourage healing over that point in the growing season. So this is what it looks like when the branch dies back. It goes this dark grey colour. On this long shoot here, I'm going to cut this back to this node, again leaving just a little bit for dieback. There's a little dead branch down here. I can cut that back a little more. All this section's getting a little bit too congested and inverse taper like to me, so I'm just going to cut this off right in here. I really want to emphasize the point that this was a practice tree, because with Japanese maple specifically, unlike other trees like taxus and junipers where deadwood and hollows in trees can be quite attractive, with the Japanese maple, scars like this on the trunk here and here can actually devalue a tree. They can be made to look quite nice, but just generally speaking, they can devalue a tree. The trees can be more prone to infection and things like that. So when we develop maples, we want to have almost a seamless looking trunk. On this maple, there's a little branch beginning to develop on the inside of this bend, so I'm going to cut this off. And when you cut them off when they're young like this, that doesn't leave a big scar like we get here. So whenever you have Japanese maples, you really want to keep on top of the little buds that begin on the trunk or on branches where you don't want any further growth. If you get them super early, it's really minimal damage to the tree. And now moving on to this next maple. This is actually an air layering off of another tree that I did in the last growing season. You could just consider this tree a piece of raw material because it hasn't been styled as a bonsai quite yet. And even pieces of raw material like this can be worked on to develop them and just improve them a little bit more. There are 3 branches coming from this one spot. This tree could make quite a nice twin trunk in the future. I may change my mind on this and just have this as a single trunk tree. And just looking at this tree, it's in development. I don't want to start refining this yet. It doesn't really have a defined trunk line. The branches do have massive internodes. It's all over the place. All I want to do is just encourage this tree to get taller, and as a result it will thicken. It's one thing saying, oh, just leave that tree alone, let it do its thing and it will be fine. But just for me, this isn't enough. I want to come in, make sure the structure of the tree is growing correctly. That way we've got less problems to deal with in the future. There's quite a lot going on in this area here. We don't really know which one of these branches is the leader of the tree, because any one of these branches could become the leader of the tree. If we keep all of these branches, we'll get swelling in these areas. And then no matter what, once these problems occur, we're gonna have to cut it off and fix the problem. I want to give this tree just one defined leader. That way we don't have to correct anything later. That's not what I want to keep. None of these seem right either. I'm really thinking this branch here could be a good leader because it's got upward growth. That's what you would want in a leader, and it would have nice taper if I cut it back. So I'm just going to shorten this back to here. I'm going to shorten this one. That way more energy goes into here, and that one, because it is longer and it is the uppermost branch, this will become the leader, no problem. If I just follow this up with my eye, I can see here it bifurcates into 2. Again, we're going to get inverse taper right here, so I'm just going to cut that back, hoping that that will just go down and die off. This will be the leader. Further up on the same branch, we've got another bifurcation, and again, this could be another competing trunk line, so not taking it off completely like the last one, but I am going to just shorten it down to first nodes on it, and then I'll just allow this to grow. All these little branches here could be seen as potential problems, especially how it splits at the top here, but I'm simply going to keep all of this because this is what's going to grow and get longer next year, and that way the tree can stay nice and vigorous at the top section. This is a maple I got from a garden center just as a normal Japanese maple. There was quite a large competing trunk line at this part of the tree. I cut it off about 2 years ago, and as you can see here already, this cut has more or less completely healed shut. And then further up on the trunk, you can see there was probably a branch here that I cut off. There was a massive competing trunk line right here. I cut that off, allowed the next side branch to become the leader. Now the front that I've chosen for this tree is not the side that you're looking at right now, because as you can see, there's a scar here, a scar here. I like to put the cut at the back. So this is actually the front of the tree for me, and I place this bifurcation in a nice horizontal position. What tends to happen is they get a more vertical position like this. I want it to be nice, flat and horizontal. This just doesn't lend itself to what I want to happen here. So I'm going to cut that out, put all these ones out back here. I'll just let that die back naturally. This branch is growing straight towards the viewer, so we can get rid of that. This one's growing in towards everything, so we can get rid of that. I want this to have a nice split. This one's growing at the bottom of a branch. Cut this. And this one again is growing at the bottom of a branch. And then again, this one's growing in towards everything, so I'm just gonna get rid of that. I want a nice negative space in between everything. It is a possibility, an option, to take a piece of wire, coil it around the branch, and then manipulate the branches in this way. For the amount of bending that I want to do, by the time the branch holds in place, there could be some scarring on this little branch, which I really don't want. Instead, I'm going to put a guy wire to pull this branch down a little. Guy wires can be anchored to the trunk, a root, or even the side of a pot. The only disadvantage of guy wires is you can't really get nice curvy movement that you can with coiling wire. And because all I want to do to this branch is bring it down, a guy wire is the perfect choice for here. Putting a wire directly onto it like this and applying tension and pressure isn't such a good idea. Ideally, you want to put something on here to protect the branch. Some people use like rubber tubings. They put it over the wire and wrap it around that way to protect it. You could use some medical tape, or what recently I like to use is this. This is known as gaff tape. tape, and this is used a lot on film sets for like taping down wires or just fixing things. But what I really like about this tape is it's easily teared, the adhesive doesn't leave any residue, and it is made from extremely durable woven cotton. I don't like to wrap this directly on the branch. You could if you wish to. Doing it like this would make putting it onto an exact place really easy. But first what I like to do is just fold the tape in half, make a little piece of padding, fold it again, and then again. So it's really nice and thick. That's going to protect this really well. Then just to make sure it stays in place, I take an extra piece of tape, put this over here and secure it around like this. And now when I take this and anchor it around, the branch is really well padded and protected. So I'm just going to take this wire, twist it off at this end. That looks something like that. And then to anchor this, I put a little hole in the pot just around the lip here. This wire can come through here. I want to make sure the wire is nice and straight, and we can apply some tension, getting the branch to the position we want. As you can see, you can easily just adjust this by pulling. Again, don't pull too hard or this could snap. Maples are very fragile. I'm going to pull up like this. That holds the tension, and then we can come around the wire. And I think this area now could make quite a nice pad on the tree. I like the distance it has from the trunk before it begins to split. So I'm going to cut this back, leaving lots of room for dieback. Again, here, there's got a node there, but just to be safe, I'm going to leave 2 nodes just in case this one doesn't make it. It can die back to that one. I did the same here. I've kept these 2, and if this doesn't make it, it will die back to this one. If you ever want to be really on the safe side with maples, just leave 2 nodes. Now my next plan with this tree is simply to leave all the top just like the last tree and make it into an air layering, because this part of the tree is quite interesting. It's got nice branching. It's very straight in this section and continues that way the whole way up. So what I'm going to do instead is keep this branch as the new leader of the tree, air layer it here in summer. This will become a new tree and then we can work from there. And then moving on to this final maple, this came straight from a garden center. And just because this tree didn't come from a bonsai nursery, this doesn't mean we can't take something from a garden center like this and have a go at it for bonsai. The first thing I like to do is just dig around the base of the tree to see what kind of graft we've got. And as you can see, there's a little bit of inverse taper here. If you're not happy with the graft, you can always come in and air layer it in the summer to here. That can always be corrected. 3 branches coming from this spot is not a good thing, so I'm just going to remove 2 of them. Keep this nice one in the middle. With bonsai, generally they don't have any branches on the bottom third of the tree, because if you look at how trees grow in the wild, in nature, the bottom branches tend to die off. So if we're trying to create a tree that looks miniature, getting rid of all the bottom branches is a good first step. This one is really bad inverse taper. Check this out. As you can see, there's so many branches coming from the one spot, and it's got this big swelling at the top here. I want this tree to be a nice twin trunk, and as it is right now, there's a lot of branches growing in towards the center, and with this I want this to grow nice and out and elegant. So anything growing in towards the center I'm going to cut off, and again leave a little stump. This branch looks too thick in comparison to the trunk line. I want this to have lots of little fine branches to start with, because as these branches down here thicken and catch up to this one, when this one grows, it will be even thicker, and it could even become a competing trunk line at that point. So I'm just going to cut this right in, and where I'm cutting this, these little branches will take over this spot. I could keep this, air layer it off. Because some inverse taper has started here, I don't want it to go any more when it begins growing in the growing season. So I'm going to take this off. And if you don't want to waste the piece that you cut off, you can use this for lots of winter cuttings. So all looks good if I follow it up. It tapers nicely into here. And then again at this spot, there's now 3 branches growing from the one spot again. I'm going to reduce this down to just 1. What I did was do some structural pruning and correct any mistakes that could become a bigger problem in the future. And now from this point, we can begin wiring all these little thin branches down and get the tree into a nice triangular shape. Just sometimes in bonsai, we have to take a little step back where the tree might look bad for a little period of time, where we fix all the errors. And then when the tree grows and flourishes, things are growing into all the right places. And now, as a bonus part of this video, I'm going to be doing a winter wash. And this is simply just treating the trees for fungus and insects before they go away for the winter. And to do this winter wash, I'm going to be using some lime sulfur. And when working with lime sulfur, safety is extremely important. Wear gloves and eye protection. Wear long sleeve to protect your arms from any sparks. And because we are going to be spraying this and it's going to be a mist in the air, you definitely want to do this in a well ventilated area. If you can, find a lime sulfur that is full strength and high quality, because you know this will do the job more efficiently. And you know your lime sulfur is high quality as it will have this deep rich reddish orange color to it. And now I'm just diluting this into water in a ratio of 20:1. Now I'm simply going to mist this directly onto the trees. And I'm going to do this to the majority of the trees in my bonsai collection. Try not to get it on the surface of the soil because you don't want it going down into the soil, just on the branches. And I would recommend that whatever species that you're spraying this onto, do a little bit of research just to make sure that the species is okay with lime sulfur going on it. If you're spraying lime sulfur on a tree that is in a nice bonsai pot, something that's ceramic or has a nice glaze on it, and it's quite an expensive pot, you want to protect the pots, so wrap them in aluminium foil or even some old newspaper. Wait till the lime sulfur dries on the tree and then take it off. But on that, I'm going to end off this video right here. If you enjoyed, please be sure to leave a like on this video. It really helps out the channel a lot with the YouTube algorithm. And please let me know down in the comments what you thought of this video, my approach to pruning maples. And if you have any tips for me on how to prune maples just a little bit better than I'm doing, I'm always open to new and different ideas in bonsai. But on that, thank you so very much for watching.